Hello, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in to today's webcast. My name is Zina M. Pagan, your host for today. Before we begin with today's program, please pay attention to our house rules. We aim to provide you with the best webcast experience possible. Please help us execute this by keeping yourself muted. The audio will be streamed. This means you will be able to hear us through your computer speakers. However, if you prefer to use the teleconference option, please use the information provided or access the Communicate tab in the menu bar. Additionally, I will post the teleconference information into the chat box throughout the webcast. Should you have any questions during the session, please send these to me using that same chat box. All questions will be addressed at the conclusion of the presentation. This session will be recorded. If you'd like to view the recorded event, the file will be available in 2 weeks. We are extending the conversation on social media, so if you'd like to join us, please use hashtag ARF Webcast. If you're interested in presenting your work at a webcast, please contact me at Zena, Z-E-N-A, at thearf.org. Before I hand it over to our presenters, I'd like to invite you all to a few of our upcoming events. Now move to April, ARF's Audience Time Science, the agenda-setting conference on audience growth and measurement, will gather a cross-section of industry leaders to address today's measurement and growth challenges, while bringing the future into sharp focus. This is our one premier ARF conference for 2019. The conference will feature dozens of inspiring speakers from forward-thinking companies, including Xandr, the New York Times, Turner, Hulu, and Axios. The best news is you can save $200 today by registering for our early mover rate. You'll want to hurry. Rates do go up on February 16th. You can visit our website to register. Additionally, our next webcast will be held on February 13th with Emeritus Amy Shea and Elda Daly. Amy and Elda will provide a better understanding of how to place advertising and how to interpret the analytics of commercial effectiveness. If you're interested in participating in any of these programs, please send me a note at zena@thearf.org, and I will be happy to assist you. And now, without further delay, I present to you all Tanya Yuki and Chris Puckett. Tanya Yuki is the founder and CEO of Shareablee, the leading provider of actionable competitive intelligence for social media. She began her career as a media and internet attorney, specializing in digital rights management, IP, and film financing. Since moving to the U.S., Tanya has run an online video content network as head of acquisitions and branding, has led product management for Comscore's Videometrics, and is now an active member of the World Economic Forum's Media and Entertainment Council. Tanya also founded WimLink in 2008, an organization that holds regular events and seminars promoting entrepreneurship, leadership, and the professional development of women. Chris is the Vice President of Agency Solutions at Shareablee. He is a digital advertising leader, having worked at Google for 4 years on the team that spearheaded the launch of Google Ad Manager. Chris was also one of the earliest members of the Facebook ad sales team, convincing agencies and CMOs for the first time that social media was a worthy investment and would be a large part of their marketing budgets in the future. Chris then joined BuzzFeed to start their advertising sales team, and from there, Chris went on to help start Rogue Fitness, one of the fastest growing and largest sports e-commerce sites. After Rogue, Chris went to Fullscreen to help create some of the largest influencer sponsorship partnerships with household consumer brand names and the largest digital influencers. Chris most recently led the U.S. office for Unilad, launching the popular UK brand in the U.S. Tanya and Chris, welcome to the ARF Webcast program, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Zena. We're very excited to share some of our findings and our research.
Thank you, Zena. Very excited to talk to everyone today.
Thank you.
Terrific. So I'm going to pop in and share my screen now. Okay. And just one quick technical check, Zena, that you're seeing everything clearly here, the title slide?
Yes, I am, ma'am.
Wonderful. Great. We're so excited, everyone, to chat about measuring branded content success in a multi-platform social world. We're going to be sharing a jam-packed agenda for you today. We'll be covering off, I'm just going to pop through to the agenda and then we'll come back, why advertisers must care about branded content. We're going to talk with a couple of examples just so that we all level set on the terrain of the conversation. We're then going to move into a by the numbers analysis, looking at engagement and growth in the US by sector and by platform, as well as the movement of branded video on social. And then we're going to close with sort of the meat of the discussion, which is around options, methodologies, and approaches for measuring advertising effectiveness when it comes to branded content, and share a couple of case studies as well. So for those of you who don't currently work with Shareablee, I'm just going to spend a minute introducing ourselves and our data set so you have the context of where a lot of these insights are coming from. So I founded Shareablee just a little on 6 years ago, really with a core vision of capturing every shared moment between a consumer and a piece of advertiser or publisher content across the social web. Today, that universe of collection is over 1 million brands in over 60 countries, and now over 10 million influencers daily. So it is a big census of what's happening out there on social, and we collect all that information for 3 reasons. The first is to shed light on audience intelligence, so giving you insights on what your audiences are doing, perhaps when they're not with you, because oftentimes you'll know your own audience is cold, you'll know their preferences, you'll know what they care about, but you won't necessarily know how they're spending their time elsewhere. So we like to shed light there. The second is to bring a lot of those insights towards actionable creative, and that can be across paid, owned, and earned, because the torrent of content, and both paid and organic, that are being published is really unlike anything that we've seen for any other platform, and we believe that data can help shed light on how to navigate that. And then finally, the goal of today, which will center around today's conversation, for cross-platform benchmarking and advertising effectiveness, because none of this matters if you can't count it and if you can't prove the value. A little more about us. You'll be familiar with a lot of the rankings and information that we put out for our industry. We'll be coming out with our 2018 Fact Pack very shortly to announce some of the brand performance and brand trackers across social. Shareablee is also available in certain geographical markets via Comscore, and our data lives inside the Bloomberg terminal, which is also used to vet company performance based on specifics around social media activity. So just a little about us. All right, you guys, why don't we dive in? So I'm just going to tee up a little bit about why branded content is so important to me and why it's a format that I'm so passionate about. And then Chris will take us through some specific examples just so that we're all grounded on what's going on here. So the first point that really stands out for branded content, and you all know this as researchers and data scientists, is that measuring attention, let alone collecting attention, is really, really tough. Even with some of the best ads, particularly in a mobile social environment, you'll get partial attention at best. So if there's a way that you can bring people into a consuming content experience, that's obviously really, really powerful in this sort of low attention span, a very distracted community that we find ourselves in. The second, I often read advice where people sort of say, gosh, advertisers, you need to intersect culture, right? Like you need to inject your brand message into what's happening in the world right now, and then it will all be great. And it turns out that's just really hard. It's really hard for brands to create genuine, authentic reasons to be present in culture. And again, partnering with creators, both media companies as well as influencers, is just a great way to have that seat at the table and be involved in culture in a very natural way where it's already happening. And then finally, let's say you can get attention, let's say you can intersect culture. Gosh, making people feel differently about your message is even tougher. So this concept of influence, but it really is the minimum passage to entry. With consumers being more and more empowered to research about products and to really get peer-driven opinions, being able to shift those opinions and influence how people feel, is just something that really is a requirement these days. And I personally believe that branded content is a great way to package that up in a very natural feeling, very sort of authentic and real content experience.
Thanks a lot, Tanya. Hey, welcome everyone. We're excited to take you through some examples here. Tanya really served up some great reasons why people are doing branded content. We wanted to show you some examples, some best-in-class examples of what publishers and brands are doing with branded content these days. But as the media landscape has evolved, publishers and brands and marketers in general are using social platforms in lots of different ways today. Really, leveraging the social presence of a brand is truly sort of at the heart of why someone would work in social. So Bleacher Report, for example, it's a great example. If they're working with brands, let's say Coca-Cola, they're using their social platforms and the power of their platforms to generate reactions, response, shares, video views, and everything that could go with a great media campaign. So, publishers, brands, media companies, they're using social platforms for branded content marketing en masse. It's really around the power of social, all of the response and sort of engagement you can get out of social. And it's really happening across the board at every level in media. So what we want to do is take you through some great examples of what those look like. We're really going to take you through campaign examples and some things that we found in our dashboard. And really, kind of finding, who are the strongest marketers in branded content these days? What platforms are they on? What type of content are they doing? This one is a great example. This is the #1 branded content video from 2018 that we saw on Shareablee. And it's with the publisher Blossom. And this is where Blossom worked with ShopRite to do custom videos that they posted to their social media pages. So the advantage to working with Blossom is that when ShopRite can work with Blossom, they can create a custom video to their audience and then get out all the engagement and all of the good things that you can get out of social, mainly sharing, engagement, video views, just by posting their video to Blossom. So you can see that, and we have a little issue with the rendering here, but that's okay, it'll work itself out. You can see that this campaign was one of the largest of 2018, and we're really looking at that 1.6 million number as total actions as being one of the strongest indicators. So we'll jump over here to Walking Dead. This was one of the other largest campaigns that we've seen in 2018. Essentially, generating a high number of video views. You can see they generated over 12 million video views. When The Walking Dead worked with Amazon here, they may have given them a guarantee on video views and a guarantee on performance, but the advantage for Amazon Fire TV here is that the campaign has the potential to go much bigger. So you see that they got over 12 million video views, very strong reactions, total actions in social of over 555,000. And so this is a very high-performing campaign, one that ranked very highly in our list of branded content. And again, a little bit more, with the rendering issues, but that should hopefully work itself out. Here's another great example with Cheerios. So this is Ellen DeGeneres working with Cheerios. Very high-ranking campaign in our dashboard. Ellen is, herself a media company, of course, with her show, all for social platforms. The title of the slide is Influencers as Media Companies. And here, Ellen is one of those best examples where she can work with a brand like Cheerios, reach anyone who's buying Cheerios, and create terrific video and integration into her show that will live in social media. So you can see the actions and the views are very high. This campaign may have started out with a low amount of view guarantee, but then they may have over-surpassed it. We saw it ranked very highly in our dashboard. So this is a best-in-class example of branded content. Another one here is, Roger Federer with Rolex. So, of course, anytime you watch the Australian Open or the US Open, you're going to see Rolex ads. But this is, Roger Federer himself working with Rolex to create branded video that lives on his pages. And you can see, healthy amount of video views. Total actions are very high compared to some of those other big branded video. And what we've seen is sports influencers are now some of the most powerful and largest influencers in general. So you see a lot of branded integration or branded content with sports influencers. And they're essentially creating custom video that lives on their Facebook pages or their Instagram accounts, and that gives a brand like Rolex a lot of engagement and a lot of video views that they need to reach their audience. So we're going to jump over to some other platforms. We're going to go through YouTube, and we're going to go through Instagram as well. This is a great example of a campaign that was done by Oreo. So Oreo was looking to do branded content with influencers. They had found this influencer named Scott DW, who's a filmmaker and YouTube star, essentially. He has, over, I think, 1.5 million subscribers on his pages. But you can see, without going into the video itself, it's a highly creative video. It stars some of the, the biggest dancers around today. Glitch, who was on America's Got Talent. But this video, over its lifetime, over the last few years, has done over 12 million views. The thing to keep in mind about this video is that it had no paid media support. So it's organic distribution. If you create a good product, a great video, and you put it on a good place that has high distribution, it's likely going to go very big. And this is a great example from Oreo on YouTube. We'll talk a little bit more about Instagram. So, Instagram has become a very, I would say it's probably one of the most popular choices for marketers right now. Definitely as its growth, we'll see later on, has shown, Instagram is probably the place now where most marketers are thinking top of mind where they're going to put their branded content. We just see some examples from left to right here: Bleacher Report and Nike, National Geographic and State Farm, and Lad Bible and Mountain Dew. A few differences here that you can see. Bleacher Report is really known for their animation. No one can really top their animation and branded content. So they're doing really, really well with that. And you can see this Nike ad that they created here really reflects that. National Geographic is all about stunning photography. Surprise, surprise. But here they're working with the top photographers in the world and some of the top brand marketers. So State Farm here has done a sponsored post, which is a sponsored photo of Nat Geo. And if you're following National Geographic's Instagram, you'll see a steady flow of sponsored content and sponsored image posts that come on their Instagram. And again, with the best photographers in the world doing branded content on the highest performing social channel, which is National Geographic. Lad Bible is a British publisher that's taken off. They've become a very big publisher. They publish in lots of different verticals. Gaming is one of their bigger verticals. But here's an easy integration that they do with Mountain Dew, where they do custom content that lives entirely on Instagram. And we can talk a little bit more about Instagram. Of course, Instagram has the ability to be very creative and very fun. Here's an example from Philips. And as you see, these sliders at the bottom, of course, give you the ability as a user to interact with this media. What it does in the back end is it gives marketers and measurement people the ability to take data out and start to understand how's my audience responding to this and how's my audience really reacting to the creative I put forth. So with Instagram stories, you really have the ability to do several frames of different content that leads into different activities. This is a great example right here of KFC. What's hotter than the sun or the Zinger Double Down? And it looks like people voted for the sun in this case. But this is just an example of what KFC is doing. Again, this polling data is all usable, and it comes out from the back end of Instagram. So these publishers and brands are using these voting mechanisms not only to have fun with creative, but also product test and do some more research and gain more insights from their audience. Of course, swiping up is the metric that we're all looking at with Instagram stories. Swiping up is that more performance-based metric that really gets to, okay, so what did my Instagram story do? How do we generate traffic from Instagram? That swiping up feature has become wildly popular. So direct-to-consumer marketers, brands, anyone either selling a product or looking for a response out of Instagram is using swipe up in their creative to generate that response. So that feature itself is probably one of the leading tools in Instagram for people to use.
Thanks, Chris. And just to hover on here for 1 second.
Okay, great.
I think one of the things, so as a consumer, I look at a lot of these formats and go, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. I love it. It's really fun. It's really visual. And of course, as a measurement provider, you also go, oh gosh, swipe up, amazing metric for measurable results. One of the issues there, of course, is you don't have competitive norms, or you won't necessarily look, through category averages or others. So we're going to talk a little more about how we're helping bridge some of that divide, because as I'm sure you just saw, there's a lot of innovation in ad formats and storytelling formats, and that's just going to keep accelerating. And the question that we have, of course, in measurement is, how do we make sure that the solutions that we're providing pace with a lot of this innovation? Now, measurement always will lag the consumer, of course, but with the velocity that we've seen, just even in our measurement of Instagram stories, it's really unlike any format that we've measured before in terms of growth and scale. So awesome. So now let's pop through and do a quick by the numbers. We're going to start with a little bit of anchoring just around the social space overall. We're going to talk about some of the trends in branded content, and we're going to move right through to how we actually propose different models around proving ROI. So let's kind of start to get a sense of scale. There were just over 5.7 million pieces of content, both paid and organic, crafted and published by advertisers and publishers in 2018. If you take that number, it's a big number, but if we consider how big that was for influencers, that number is closer to 40 million. So, when you think about how you're going to be vying for attention as an advertiser or as a publisher, there's definitely some real dwarfing from a content volume standpoint. Same thing from an engagement standpoint. 66 billion shared moments where a consumer found something that one of you all posted so enthralling, interesting, inspiring, valuable that they actually stopped what they were doing on their platform and shared it with everyone they've ever known and loved. 66 billion, huge number. If we compare that to the influencer space, it's actually a little closer to 185 billion. So, so this is also why in a lot of our ad effectiveness examples, we're talking a little about how we think about also measuring ad effectiveness and multi-platform campaigns with influencers. This is really the reason why we're also making sure that influencers are an important part of the conversation. So moving through now and taking a little look about the US landscape overall. So what you're seeing in this top set of charts are the composition of post volume across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you add up all the posts published 2017 to 2018, here's what that comp looks like. It's actually pretty similar in terms of volume and share year over year. And then this is what consumer engagement looked like in the same time. So Twitter gained some share. Instagram also gained share. One thing I always say when I'm looking at engagement charts like this, from a research perspective, of course each platform is a little different. So, you always have to bear in mind that, that the formats are different, but just to get a real sense of output versus engagement back. And this is what that same chart looks like if I include influencers as well. So Instagram becomes much, much, much more dominant. It was 68% of all actions without influencers, but with influencers it jumps up to almost 80%. Twitter is still on that same growth trajectory, and the ecosystem as a whole is still growing. But you do see, the tremendous momentum of the platform. And I will sort of say too, whereas for Facebook, a lot of the momentum, and also for Twitter, is with video, Instagram video and images are still pacing at a pretty similar rate. So this is what that same chart looks like when we consider growth. So if you look at January 15 through to present day, We're seeing some really healthy double and triple digit growth. Twitter growing in the thousands of percentages, and Facebook and Instagram growing in the healthy 3 figures as well. So you really have a format where the wind is at your back. And even though we're seeing much more content show up in this mobile social environment, we're not really seeing a slowdown in terms of how much consumers are willing to react and respond to that content. So, still in that really healthy early growth mode. This is what that looks like when we actually take down the covers and see what this looks like from a category standpoint. So, video across all categories grew, just on 17%. It's largely driven by sport, media and entertainment and publishing. And then of course, this is what engagement growth happened during that same time period. And this is sort of how you can visualize it too. And when you can see, sports, publishing and media and entertainment really comprising a huge portion of all of these categories, it sets the stage for why branded content is such a valuable format, because it's really where all of the consumer activity is happening today. And yet we're still really early. So, if you look at the social space and talk about monetization, you'll read loads of articles on branded content, but today branded content comprises just 3% of all US video posts, and I think about 2.5% of all US posts in aggregate. So, we're really not at that point where we're, pushing the limits of how much advertiser content or brand-supported content can be carried by the format. It's still really, really early. One thing I will say anecdotally is 3% might seem really, really low, but if I looked at that a year ago, it was probably 0.7% or 0.5%. So massive momentum, but still a very small part of all formats. But because we're starting to see campaigns that are much, much bigger than they were, let's say a year ago, it's why there's so much pressure to start to share the value and talk about it beyond clicks and retweets and simple engagement. I'm just going to pop through here too. Here were a couple of the winners. You'll see all of this in, in the materials that will circulate through, so I won't spend as much time here. But just a couple things to highlight. Pay close attention to what percentage of content is actually advertiser supported versus how much engagement happens. Here's a great example with the NFL, who had just about 4.5% of all their content brand supported, and that 4.5% drove 26% of all of the consumer engagement. So, you can see that content was well loved, it was high performing, particularly compared to, the MLB or the NBA, who saw a slight dip in the representative consumer responses that we got back. So that's always a really good health measure to look at. Oftentimes if you're an advertiser and you're vetting who to partner with, you'll look at the overall performance on all social content, but really it's these metrics that will give you a good sense of the kinds of reactions that you'll get from consumers, not looking at the whole, which could be organic and really not designed to support business value. And then the same ranking across US publishers. We saw that Blossom had the top post, although Tasty in aggregate had the top spot, with just on 3% of their content that was ad supported, and it's driving about 5% of all engagement. But really the big, new entrant into the top 10 was the Players Tribune, that had a whopping 42% of almost 43% of all their content driven from ad supported. And they, were barely in that top ranking a year ago. So seeing a lot of momentum there too. And then finally looking across television networks, with NBA TV, Food Network and HGTV taking the top spot across Discovery, and then a breakdown, because it isn't just at the network level, we're also seeing this happen on the show level too for prime time. Okay. So to flip this same view, what are the kinds of advertisers who are actually funding a lot of this content? And I will say, when we looked at last year across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, for anything above a certain level of activity, we saw something like 40,000 unique advertisers. So this isn't just something for the big guys. It's something that's being leveraged down the line as well for some, more niche local market advertisers. But the big names are probably, who you can expect. There's, high activity across CPG, across telecom and automotive. So these were the guys who saw the greatest amount of activity for branded content in 2018. And this is what it looks like from a category standpoint. So retail and consumer goods, both from a consumer activity as well as a video view standpoint, which to Chris's earlier point, largely reflects spend, not quite, but largely, because things are often bought on a views basis. So retail, CPG, and then automotive and finance, also, being significant alongside telecom too. So that's what the breakdown is in terms of who's really doubling down in social media investments. In terms of where all of the dollars are flowing, it's pretty tied between sporting brands and sports media publishers and then core media and entertainment. And online publishing or digital first publishing is also very significant. So it's almost pretty evenly spread across those breaks. When you add in influencers, however, it pushes things down to a slightly different story, with influencers taking almost 50% of all of the consumer engagement around ad-supported content. So, just another growing trend to be wary of, where oftentimes, your ad sales teams will be out selling against whoever they've traditionally sold against, but just know that, a good part of the consideration are these individual creators as well. Awesome. So now moving through to, that all sounds great. That all sounds exciting. Now, how on earth do we map this back to the business and understand how best to vet some of these multi-platform campaigns in a way that's consistent with how we think about research? One thing that that we hear over and over that sort of inspired us to, share some of the solutions today as well as what we do in market, is a traditional report right now in social on branded content, and Chris, you can weigh in on what your experiences were too on the other side of the table. But, there's all of these stuff, right? Like, wow, you got this number of shares, terrific, you got a high engagement rate, your impressions were this or your views were that. And that's all great, and that's, that's useful, but it doesn't necessarily tie back to what the advertiser was hoping to achieve. And that big chasm is something that we're really, trying to really close the gap on.
Yeah, exactly. The great thing about this type of media is that it produces these big results and it gives you big numbers, right? Video views is probably the number one metric that everyone talked about for so long. How many views can I get on my video? What's your cost per view? But that metric, given your definition of a video view, what does that really lead to? So, of course, you can get these big numbers with doing really effective organic or paid social content, but then, down the chain, down the funnel, where does that really go? So I think it, if you want to jump to the next slide, I think it, really starts to beg the question, okay, so what's my effectiveness, my ROI? Really looking at the lift from these campaigns. We like to say if you can't show it, we don't know it. So, what we're really looking to achieve now and starting to go down this road is understanding, so what does this all get me? I've created this big campaign. I've got all these video views. I've reached a lot of people. We see a lot of likes and comments and retweets. But what does that all mean, right? And, we've started to think through ways that we can approach that in an advertising effectiveness framework, essentially, taking these types of campaigns, multi-platform social campaigns, and putting them through the lens of measurement in different areas to give marketers really, those answers they need to prove that these campaigns are really effective. So, when it boils down to, three areas in ad effectiveness, it's really understanding, how am I doing against other people in my category? How am I doing against other advertisers? how is my content performing on different publishers' platforms, what is the benchmark in my category. At least from my experience, that was one of the key questions, or one of the most common questions I would get from an advertiser. How well did we do? How well did we do against other advertisers, against other people in the category in the time period? And so that's really the key sort of first area that we start to look at in social content ad effectiveness. It's really what we call CPI, and it's Campaign Performance Index. So essentially, we've created a number, or a CPI, a campaign index around the strength of your campaign, really the quality of the campaign, how well it performed, and truly what that boils down to is benchmarking. So CPI is really a benchmark that we would create with the marketer. It's custom to the campaign or the marketer in general, but benchmarking is really that first pillar that we look to compare to for campaign performance. The second area is really behavior lift. So our ability to see all of this data coming out of social allows us to see all of the activity for a given period of time for a brand or a publisher or a group of brands and publishers. So we truly can see that deep level of behavior in regards to a campaign, and how much did the campaign actually affect behavior after the campaign. So behavior lift is that second pillar, and it's really understanding how well did my campaign produce results? How well did my campaign, produce, someone's behavior pre, during, and post-campaign? What is the true lift from my campaign in actions and activity as a result of the campaign?
Yeah, so similar to how you might look at shifts in site visitation or search activity or others, this is essentially a shift in social media activity for the advertiser. And we can talk about what the caveats there are as well later.
And the third pillar we look at is brand lift, so survey. And what we like to do then is conclude these studies, or add to these studies, survey with questions related to the campaign that really give the marketer an idea of how well did my campaign resonate with people, how much consideration does my brand have now as a result of the campaign. Are people most likely to visit the brand or take an action as a result of the campaign? Typical survey questions that come as a result of these, but when you combine these all three together, they make a very comprehensive report about a social campaign.
Cool. So we'll lightning round some of what these solutions are good for, and then we'll close out with some case examples. So CPI is really the proving out that my branded content was better than yours, and better equals more engaging, more shareable. So this is a really social for social type solution. If you need to prove to an advertiser, or if you're an advertiser, you want to understand that the fact that you partnered with this publisher or this creator got you more consumer buzz and engagement than you would have otherwise gotten either by yourself or in partnering with someone else. So, I kind of like to call this the, proving that you quote unquote get social and you're good at social, but that's very much within the realm there, and this is kind of what it looks like, right? You can compare your branded content with other media company content that was partnering with a retailer in the same time period. And this shows that normalized for the number of video views, your campaign got 3.4 times more engagement for those views than the average branded content campaign during that time. So this is really a more of a benchmarking for social media performance. The second solution, which Chris talked about, this is really good to prove. Like, let's say Revlon has partnered with Gal Gadot or with the Oscars on a great branded content campaign right around the Oscars, and Revlon wants to understand did this actually create more engagement among that audience with Revlon than they had before the campaign was run. And it's great if Revlon is active on social, and it's terrible if the advertiser is not publishing on social. So that's always one check here. It's sort of like if you were measuring site visitation lift for a display ad campaign, but the advertiser didn't have a website, right? There'd be nowhere for it to go. So we always like to check that the advertiser partner, is also active on social, but it looks something like this. It goes, hey, pre-campaign, this publisher or this creator's audience, about 5%, cared about this advertiser, and post-campaign, we actually saw that a different percentage of those same people were now cross-engaging with that advertiser's content. And in this world, you need to make this leap with me that says that engaging with an advertiser equals something positive. It equals more awareness, more brand favorability, more consideration, etc. And this was a specific live example where Revlon had partnered with a series of musicians and influencers and publishers around a Share the Love campaign, and you saw, pre-campaign to post-campaign, people who cared about beauty, right? The branded content did not make people want lipstick who didn't care about lipstick. However, within the world of people who cared about lipstick or eyeshadow or mascara or whatever it is, 14% of those had been actively engaging with Revlon before the campaign ran, and 37% of that same audience were cross-engaging with some Revlon ad or content after the campaign. And you can actually sort of see where that share came from. So that was really powerful, but it is measuring, to Chris's point, the movement of people in the realm of social media, which always begs the question, well, did it actually change hearts and minds? Did it change people's opinions? Do they feel differently? Which brings us to the third solution that we'll talk about, which is around a specific brand lift solution where those audiences are actually surveyed, so we can move beyond likes and clicks to get at some of that important attitudinal stuff. And here's an example of what an output looks like, where you're measuring across awareness, familiarity, favorability, perception, and then, often purchase consideration and purchase intent, where you can look at the differences between a control group of people who fit the same demographics as the campaign target, and then the exposed group who were actually activated by a social campaign. So to give you a couple more examples here of what this looks like, here's an example of a beauty brand that ran a really compelling social media campaign. I think this was run across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And this was the point change between exposed, non-exposed, across dimensions like awareness, brand perception, purchase consideration, and purchase intent. Really high deltas here and even bigger lift. But this is what some of the outputs look like. To give an example of some of the behavior lift changes, this was something specifically for an allergy brand who wanted to understand, after I've partnered with this TV network, did the people actually become more likely to seek out my creative or to otherwise engage with me on social? So this looked at what that looked like. Again, I always caution, if it's coming off of a small base, it's just real hard to to get something that works. But in this case, we saw a really nice increase. And then finally, a solution which isn't the purpose of today, but I did want to, be sure to mention it. So Shareablee has also looked across different shopper data sets and purchase data sets and other sorts of closed loop data sets. For this particular case example, we're showcasing some work that we did across a match with a company called IRI that has over 400 million shopper loyalty cards. And what we were able to see proactively was, across some of these brands for the Walt Disney Company, which brands, across consumer packaged goods, was their engaged audience more likely to be buyers of. So this was using real pro scores from IRI's data set based on purchasing data, not social data. And then over here to look at some of the increase in spend for activated audiences in this branded content campaign. And here's one of the posts from the campaign. It was a Univision partnership with Coca-Cola, where you can actually see, gosh, Compared to the control set, the purchase lift was about 17%. So something in the double digits is, really compelling in this space. And these are the sorts of things that we can start to do when you begin to get closer to these closed loop data sets, where you're not just tying to behavior shifts in social, you're not just tying to attitudinal or self-reported survey outputs, but you're tying to actual sales data and actual changes in what people do with their wallets. So just to kind of bring this to a close, and then it'd be great to spend some time opening up for questions. I think some of the big takeaways for us and that we want to leave you with, branded content on social media is growing in double digits, both in terms of presence on social, the amount of advertisers joining the fray, and then consumers reacting and responding. So it's this really fast-growing space with the wind at everyone's back, but it's still only 3% of all social content. So we're not reaching saturation points, and there's plenty of room to continue to grow. So it is a greenfield opportunity, and I think with some of the examples Chris shared, there's just some exciting new formats that are creating ways for advertisers to interact with their customers in ways that just hadn't been contemplated or so ago. We're seeing the number of advertisers jumping in the fray too. They've grown over 50% in the past year, with over 40,000 unique advertisers diving in 2018 alone. So there's certainly high concentration among some of the biggest spenders, but a lot of long tail opportunities as well. So that creates opportunities both at the national media level as well as at the local level. And then finally, because of all this momentum, because of all this activity, there is more pressure on publishers and creators than ever before to go beyond clicks and likes. Every brief that we're reading now, requires attitudinal lifts or requires something other than the number of video views or how viral the content was. And we've shared with you some of the ways that we can start moving beyond that, but we're really excited to, talk more with you all and explore other ways that we can continue to shed light on these new formats, but present it in a way that really gels with how you might be measuring some of your other platforms too. Because, if we get too innovative and too new in terms of how we tell the story of cross-platform or multi-platform social, you do run the risk that it just isn't a mutually intelligible language, and then, a lot of it really goes to waste. So that's what we wanted to share with you, but I'll kick it over. I don't know if there were any questions posted throughout, but we'd love to hear from you.
Tanya, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Great. Okay, so just as a reminder to everybody, to submit your questions, please access the chat box and send these all to me, and I will read throughout. And then second reminder is that the presentation will be available in 2 weeks, in case anybody had any questions about that. First question. Some of the examples featured were media and entertainment focused. Do I need to be a marketer or a media company in order to benefit from social influencers? And do you have any studies that address non-marketer or media companies?
Sure, I'll take the first part of that question. So in having a perspective on influencers, really anyone can work with influencers. Think of influencers as just another form of media. So if you have a goal in mind, you need to generate publicity, you need to generate attention. Anyone can work with influencers, any type of entity, but really think of them as just another media source that you would use for marketing. So they're really, and we're really talking about some of the bit more splashier activations, but there are so many more examples. There's one example I can share, the company SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a ticketing platform, a ticketing app, similar to StubHub. They use influencers, as one of the main sources marketing as their one of their biggest sales channels, which is very interesting because typically advertisers in that realm selling tickets, they're using social media, they're using search marketing, they're using email marketing. But in that case and others in that same field, they're seeing much more success and much higher success with influencers as converting better, as being more efficient to use. So it really just depends on what your goals are as a marketer, and I think it can happen at any level of an organization. And I'll let you take the other half, Tanya.
Yeah, no, so was the other half just around use cases beyond, so when you say non-marketer use cases, like where you don't have a product to market, or?
Correct.
I understand. Got it. So like maybe if you're a person, I'm just trying to think, if you don't have a product and if you don't have media, what do you have?
If your product is content.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, great question. Yeah, absolutely. And we can dig out some specific examples, but we've actually got some really great, even like if it's got business content, influencers around like business services where the product is information. We've seen some really nice activated campaigns around there. Again, the trick is, how do you select an influencer who it would make sense for them to promote your content because they understand it, they believe in it, and they're otherwise credible in it. I think where it doesn't work is when there's too broad a reach across too dispersed a number of creators that aren't really in that sweet spot for whatever your information product or your content is. And I think the only thing I'll add to that too, as many of you know, there used to be a practice across platforms like Facebook where secondary publishers or creators were essentially cross-posting or sharing content to get more reach. Like that's definitely, that's a practice that's been pulled back quite a bit. So it really would have to be a case where this is a creator, they've got something to say about, the content that you're producing, and it really makes sense for their audience.
Great, thank you. I don't have any other questions coming in at this time, but Tanya and Chris, would it be okay for anybody to reach out to you after today's webcast?
Absolutely. No, we'd be happy to take it. And I think one thing that actually just crossed my desk this morning, so we didn't try to put it into today's presentation, but on the survey solution, we've actually got some norms that we're going to go out and publish. So I'll make sure that makes its way into the materials too, because that way, people can go in with eyes wide open on the kinds of results that we're seeing across some of these sorts of campaigns, so that we can really level set.
Would you be okay sharing that with once all the content for today's webcast is ready to share?
You bet, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. Do you guys have any other closing remarks you'd like to make before we close today's webcast?
The only thing that I'll leave everyone with and is that, part of the reason why we were so excited to talk about branded content in the context of advertising effectiveness was that it really, even though it's not a new form of advertising, it's been around, in the context of social, it really performs very differently. So much so that we've even had to be very cautious and pull back on any sort of ad recall type questions for it. Because oftentimes, you'll see someone who engaged with the video, they watched it, but if you ask them, did they see the ad, they'll go no. And at first I was like, oh no, this means that recall, isn't valid. And really what we found when we dug in and did more analysis on it was that people weren't associating it as advertising. So it's a little bit of a mind shift. It requires a slightly different lens. So I would encourage everyone to, hold us to account to make sure that we provide things with methodology that, really gels with what you're comfortable with, but also challenge everyone to push the boundaries of how we think about ad effectiveness measurement, because we are really in new terrain, and I think it will require the creativity of the industry to make sure that we get the right solutions and that they are flexible and fluid enough to really move us all to the next level.
Well, Tanya and Chris, thank you so much for joining us today and for presenting your work to our webcast crowd. We all really appreciate it, and I look forward to hosting another webcast with you folks again.
Thank you so much, Lena, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.